Comrades, let us begin with a truth so sharp it cuts through every illusion built by the ruling class. The machines you operate were never meant to dominate you, they were meant to liberate you. Yet under capitalism, every tool created by human hands becomes a new chain wrapped around those same hands. Every innovation becomes a weapon of control. Every advancement becomes a justification for discarding the very workers whose genius made it possible. Such is the paradox of a system that worships profit more than people. The bourgeoisie proclaims that technology is progress, that automation is the sign of a prosperous society. But I ask you, prosperity for whom? For the workers whose labor built the machine, or for the capitalist who owns the factory, the patent, the algorithm, and thus hoards the fruits of your imagination? In Capital, I revealed how machinery under capitalism is not a neutral tool. It is a mechanism for extending domination, intensifying labor, and extracting surplus value from the worker. Today, that truth echoes louder than ever as every technological breakthrough becomes another excuse to shrink wages, eliminate jobs, and tighten the grip of capital upon your lives. Machines were meant to lighten the burden of labor, but capitalism has twisted their purpose. Instead of freeing the worker from toil, machinery has become the instrument through which workers are told they are obsolete, replaceable, unnecessary. The system does not see you as human beings, only as cost, as expendable parts, as temporary vessels of labor power to be drained and discarded. Comrades, this is not the natural order of things. It is not destiny. It is not the fault of technological progress. It is the fault of a system that places property above humanity, profit above life, and accumulation above dignity. In the Grundriss, I wrote that machines embody the general intellect, the collected knowledge, creativity, science, and skill of society. Yet capitalism privatizes this collective power, turning what should be the common wealth of all into a private engine of exploitation for the few. The owners claim the right to seize the value created by the century of collective human effort that gave birth to modern machinery. But it is the workers, past and present, who created this knowledge, who refined these tools, who built this world. The capitalist did not invent the machine, he merely purchased it. He did not innovate technology, he merely profits from it. The worker is the true creator, the worker is the true innovator. The worker is the force of history. And yet, under capitalism, the worker is asked to fear the machine, a creation of his own genius. He is told the machine will replace him because the capitalist class has no interest in using technology to reduce suffering or liberate time. Their only interest is in maximizing surplus value. Technology in their hands becomes a method to speed up labor fragment tasks, depress wages, and weaken the collective power of workers. But imagine, comrades, a society in which machines serve humanity, not profit. A society in which technological progress means shorter working hours, not mass unemployment. A society in which innovation enriches everyone, not a handful of owners. A society in which human beings, freed from the compulsion of wage labor, can develop their talents, knowledge, and creative capacities. This is not utopian dreaming. It is the logical, historical, and moral direction of human development. It is the future implied in every invention, every breakthrough, every machine ever built. Technology cries out for a world beyond capitalism, a world where collective intelligence is matched by collective ownership. But that world will not appear on its own. It requires consciousness. It requires courage. It requires unity. In the Communist Manifesto, Engels and I wrote that the proletariat must become a class for itself, aware of its power, aware of its historical mission. Today, that mission includes reclaiming control over the very machines the workers created. Not to destroy them, never, but to liberate them from the logic of exploitation and place them in the service of human need. Comrades, the ruling class trembles not at machines but at workers who understand their power. They fear a working class that knows the truth, that the wealth of society comes not from capital, not from owners, but from labor. living, breathing, thinking labor. They fear workers who refuse to be replaced, who refuse to be discarded, who refuse to surrender their future to a system built on their exploitation. The struggle before us is not against technology, but against the economic order that weaponizes it. The struggle is not against machinery, but against the minority who monopolizes it. The struggle is not against progress, but against the twisted form progress takes under capitalism. Machines were made to serve humanity, but capitalism forces humanity to serve the machine. It is time to end this inversion. Comrades, rise with clarity. Rise with unity. Rise with the conviction that history is on your side. For when workers stand together, enlightened, organized, unwavering, no machine and no master can rule over them. The future belongs to those who create it, and the creators are the workers of the world. Machines were made by humanity. Now humanity must reclaim them. Workers of all lands organize, unite, and shape a world where technology finally fulfills its true purpose, the liberation of humankind. Machines must serve human liberation, not capitalist profit, because their very existence emerges from the collective imagination, labor, and intellectual capacity of humanity, not from the isolated genius or benevolence of any capitalist owner. The history of machinery is the history of human beings striving to free themselves from the grinding burden of necessary labor, to create tools that expand their abilities rather than diminish their worth. Yet under capitalism, every machine becomes twisted into the opposite of its intended purpose, weaponized as a means to intensify exploitation, extract greater surplus value, and reduce the worker to a mere appendage of the mechanical process. The contradiction is clear. Humanity builds machines to lighten its labor, but capitalism uses them to tighten control over labor. The worker imagines the tool as an extension of freedom. The capitalist repurposes it as an extension of domination. Thus, the struggle over machinery is not a struggle against technology itself, but against the social relations that determine whether technology liberates or enslaves. When machines are governed by the logic of profit, they cannot serve the needs of the many. They serve only the narrow interests of those who own them. A machine under capitalist control does not ask, how can I make life better for society? It asks, how can I reduce the cost of labor? How can I increase output? How can I secure ever greater profit? As soon as a machine can perform the work of 10 laborers, the employer does not reduce the burden on those 10, he dismisses them and demands even faster output from those who remain. The machine becomes a silent overseer, enforcing discipline, speeding up production, and dictating the pace of the worker's life. In this sense, machinery becomes an extension of capital's power, an instrument not of human progress but of human subordination. But technology itself contains within it a revolutionary potential that capitalism cannot fully suppress. Machines embody social knowledge, accumulated skill, scientific innovation, and generations of human experience transformed into physical form. Every gear, circuit, and algorithm is the crystallization of human labor, of collective effort stretching across history. It is not the capitalist who invents this knowledge. It is humanity that invents, refines, and produces it. Because technology is inherently social in origin, it demands a social form of ownership, a system in which its benefits flow to society rather than enriching a small class that contributes nothing but financial investment. When technology belongs to the many, its purpose aligns with human flourishing. It can shorten the working day, reduce drudgery, expand leisure, enhance creativity, and open new possibilities for education, culture, and self-development. Liberation through machinery means reclaiming the time that capitalism steals. Under the current system, technological advancement simply raise expectations for productivity while workers experience no relief. But if machines were employed for human liberation, their efficiencies would translate into fewer working hours, more democratic participation in social life, better living conditions, and the flourishing of individual and collective potential. Workers would not fear automation because automation would not threaten their livelihoods. Instead of machines replacing workers, machines would replace toil. Instead of workers being cast aside, they would be elevated. Technology would finally serve the purpose for which it was created, reduction of necessary labor and the expansion of human possibility. Yet this transition cannot occur as long as the ownership of machinery remains in the hands of a minority that profits from the insecurity, dependency, and dispossession of the majority. The liberation of technology requires the liberation of labor. It requires removing machinery from the realm of private profit and integrating it into a democratic, collective economic system organized around human need. The workers who produce the machines, who refine them, who operate them, who keep them functioning, must also be the ones who direct their purpose. Only then can machinery become a tool of empowerment rather than domination. Machines must serve human liberation, not capitalist profit, because humanity deserves a social order in which technological advancement enriches life rather than eroding it, in which progress means freedom rather than fear, and in which every innovation lifts the collective rather than deepening the divide between those who own and those who labor. Technology reflects collective human genius and must belong to the worker, because every invention, every device, every system of modern production is the accumulated result of countless generations of human effort, not the isolated creation of a privileged few. The capitalist likes to imagine himself as the mastermind of progress, the visionary who drives innovation. But this illusion collapses the moment we examine the true origins of technological development. The creative force behind technology is not individual ownership but collective labor. Every scientific breakthrough draws upon centuries of accumulated knowledge from artisans who refine techniques through trial and error to workers whose practical insight shaped the industrial world. Even the most advanced algorithms and machines rely on the lived experience of millions whose labor provided the raw data, material conditions, and social environment necessary for their creation. When technology is presented as the exclusive property of capital, this collective lineage erased, and the workers are denied the very achievements they helped bring into existence. Because technology is social in its origins, it demands a social form of ownership. Under capitalism, however, technology becomes private property transformed into a tool for maximizing profit and reinforcing class domination. The owners of machinery accumulate wealth not through their own labor but by monopolizing the productive power generated by society as a whole. They claim exclusive rights over devices they did not build, patent they did not conceptualize, and systems they did not maintain. Workers, meanwhile, who generate the surplus value that makes technological expansion possible, are excluded from decision-making and denied the fruits of their own collective intelligence. This contradiction reveals why technology cannot truly serve society while it remains privately owned. As long as capital dictates how technology develops and whom it benefits, the most powerful creation of the human mind will continue to serve narrow interests rather than the needs of the many. Technology must belong to the workers because only then can it fulfill its emancipatory potential. The machine in the capitalist factory stands not as a symbol of progress but as a symbol of alienation. It shortens production time yet lengthens the working day. It increases productivity yet reduces the worker's control over the process of labor. It amplifies human capabilities yet diminishes human autonomy. Workers become dependent on tools they created but do not control, and the wealth they generate becomes a source of their own subordination. This is the tragedy of technology under capitalism. Liberation is built into the machinery, but exploitation governs its use. When workers do not own or direct the technology they operate, every advance becomes a new threat to their stability, a new justification for wage cuts, layoffs, or intensified workloads. The machine becomes a competitor instead of a companion, a force that imposes discipline instead of expanding freedom. But when technology is placed under the democratic control of workers, its character changes fundamentally. It becomes a tool for reducing labor time rather than extending it. It becomes a means of enhancing creativity rather than suppressing it. It becomes a pathway to communal well-being rather than a mechanism of profit extraction. In a system where workers collectively own and manage technological resources, the purpose of innovation shifts from maximizing returns to maximizing freedom, dignity, and social development. Machines can be used to eliminate monotonous labor, allowing workers to engage in tasks that require judgment, skill, imagination, and cooperation. Automation can reduce the burden of necessity, granting individuals the time needed to cultivate education, relationships, culture, and self-expression. Technology, freed from the constraints of capital, becomes what it was always meant, to be a force that amplifies human potential rather than undermining it. Furthermore, because technological progress depends on the contribution of the many, its benefits must be distributed among the many. Collective ownership ensures that no single class can hoard the advantages produced by society's shared intellect. It prevents the transformation of digital systems, artificial intelligence, and modern machinery into tools of surveillance, exploitation, and inequality. Instead, these systems can be harnessed for public health, sustainable production, accessible transportation, equitable education, and expanding cultural horizons. When workers control technology, innovation becomes guided by need, not greed. Social priorities replace market priorities. Human welfare replaces corporate accumulation. The immense power of modern machines can be aligned with ecological sustainability, democratic participation, and economic justice. Technology reflects collective human genius and must belong to the workers because the world it shapes is a world built by human hands and human minds. To deny workers ownership over the tools they created is to deny them ownership over their own future. Only when technology becomes a common good, managed and directed by those who operate it, can it rise to its highest purpose, the liberation of humanity from the constraints of necessity, scarcity, and domination. Only through collective stewardship of our collective creations can society realize the full promise of progress and ensure that every technological advance enriches the many rather than empowering the few. Capitalism weaponizes machinery to deepen exploitation and reduce workers' power by transforming every technological advancement into an instrument of control rather than a pathway to human betterment. Under this system, machines do not appear in the workplace to lighten the burden of labor or to elevate the worker's quality of life. They appear to intensify productivity, accelerate the extraction of surplus value, and tighten the domination of capital over labor. The introduction of machinery becomes a strategic move in the perpetual conflict between classes. Instead of being used to reduce the working day or eliminate drudgery, machines become a means to deskill labor, undermine bargaining power, and reshape the worker into a dependent and easily replaceable component of a production process that no longer requires creativity or autonomy. The brilliance of human ingenuity is thus used against the very people who created it, turning their intellectual and physical contributions into tools that benefit only the owning class. Capitalism's use of machinery is rooted in its fundamental drive, the pursuit of profit above all else. When a capitalist invests in machines, it is not to elevate the worker, but to diminish the worker's role. The machine can work longer hours, requires no wages, expresses no demands, and never organizes union. It becomes the ideal laborer from the standpoint of capital, and therefore the capitalist is incentivized to substitute machinery for living labor wherever possible. This substitution does not occur because machines inherently threaten human employment, but because the capitalist seeks to control the terms of production. By replacing skilled labor with automated processes, the employer reduces dependency on workers who possess specialized knowledge which historically has granted them leverage. The machine becomes a device for undermining that leverage, leaving workers with fewer tools to resist exploitation. Moreover, capitalism uses machinery to fragment and simplify work tasks, stripping workers of skill and transforming them into operators of repetitive motions dictated by the rhythm of the machine. This process of deskilling is not a natural outcome of technological progress, it is a deliberate restructuring of labor to make workers more interchangeable and therefore easier to discipline. The more interchangeable the worker, the less bargaining power they possess. The machine does not just replace labor, it restructures the conditions under which labor exists. It dictates the pace, tempo, and intensity of work, and it allows management to set standards that no human being can comfortably sustain without exhaustion. Technology thus becomes a whip, not a tool of liberation. enforcing compliance through its mechanical demands. In addition, machinery under capitalism becomes a means of surveillance, measurement and control. Digital systems track output, monitor movements, record errors, and enforce quotas with precision. This constant oversight creates an environment where workers internalize the mechanism of discipline, regulating themselves in fear of penalties or dismissal. What could be tools for coordination and efficiency become instruments of psychological pressure and constant evaluation. Workers experience not only physical strain but mental exhaustion, as every action is scrutinized by systems designed to extract the maximum amount of productivity from every possible moment. In this way, machinery reinforces managerial authority and dissolves the autonomy of the worker, reducing opportunities for collective resistance. Capitalism also uses machinery to create divisions within the working class by introducing technological disparities between different groups of workers. Those operating advanced machines may be granted slightly higher wages or stability, while those displaced by automation are cast into unemployment or low-paying jobs. This creates competition among workers, weakening solidarity and making collective action more difficult. The threat of replacement looms constantly, and capital exploits this insecurity to maintain discipline. The worker is told that if they do not accept worsening conditions, the machine will take their place. What should be a symbol of human progress becomes a symbol of fear. Yet capitalism cannot fully conceal the social origins of machinery. Every machine is built from the knowledge of countless workers, engineers, scientists, and inventors whose contributions form an interconnected chain of human effort. But capital claims exclusive ownership over this collective achievement and uses to dominate the very people who created it. This contradiction is at the heart of why machinery becomes weaponized under capitalism. It embodies collective intelligence, yet it is controlled privately. The capitalist appropriates the power created by society and wields it against society's producers. Ultimately, capitalism weaponizes machinery not because machines inherently exploit, but because the social relations of capitalism demand that all tools serve profit rather than people. The machine becomes an agent of alienation, not because of its design, but because of its ownership. Workers lose control over the productive forces they create, and in losing that control, they lose power over their own conditions of life. Machinery, instead of liberating humanity from toil, intensifies exploitation and secures the dominance of capital over labor. Only by transforming the ownership and purpose of technology can machinery shed its role as a weapon of exploitation and become the emancipatory force it was always meant to be. True progress requires collective ownership and democratic control of technology because the advancements of modern society are not born from the isolated brilliance of individuals but from the combined intellectual and physical labor of millions. Every innovation, whether mechanical or digital, emerges from a long historical chain of human creativity, shared knowledge, and collaborative effort. Under capitalism, however, this profoundly social creation is transformed into private property, governed by the interests of a minority whose primary motive is profit rather than human well-being. When technology is seized by private capital, its development becomes distorted, its benefits restricted, and its potential for liberation undermined. True progress cannot be measured merely by faster machines or more sophisticated systems. It must be measured by the degree to which these technologies enhance human freedom, dignity, and collective flourishing. For that to happen, the people who create, operate, and depend on technology must control its direction and usage. In a society where technology is privately owned, the priorities guiding its development remain aligned with profitability. This results in innovations designed to maximize efficiency, reduce labor costs, monitor workers, and expand consumption, rather than addressing societal needs or improving quality of life. Private ownership ensures that technological progress enriches only those who control capital, allowing them to tighten their economic and political power. Meanwhile, the workers who contribute most to technological development are left excluded from decisions that shape their lives. The potential of technology becomes stifled by the narrow logic of market competition, leading to underutilization of human creativity and misallocation of resources. When the aim is profit, not liberation, technology cannot advance in a way that benefits humanity as a whole. Collective ownership transforms the purpose of technology by redefining its function from a means of capitalist accumulation to a tool for human development. When technology belongs to society, its evolution becomes tied to societal well-being instead of private gain. Decisions about production, innovation, and distribution are made democratically, reflecting the needs, desires, and values of the community rather than the narrow interests of shareholders. Workers can determine which technologies serve the public good, how they can reduce necessary labor, and how their benefits should be shared. This democratization aligns technological progress with the collective interest, ensuring that advancements contribute to equality rather than deepening existing hierarchies. Democratic control is essential because collective ownership alone is not enough. Without democratic structures, even publicly owned technologies can be mismanaged or manipulated by centralized authorities detached from the people. Democratic control ensures transparency, accountability, and participation, allowing workers and community to directly influence how technology is used, improved, and integrated into daily life. This means people can choose to prioritize sustainable energy systems, equitable distribution networks, universal access to communication tools, and technologies that enhance education and healthcare. It also ensures that labor-saving innovations translate into reduced working hours and improved living conditions instead of layoffs or intensified exploitation. Furthermore, democratic control fosters a culture of cooperation and shared knowledge. Instead of innovation being restricted by patents, corporate secrecy, and competition, collective ownership encourages open collaboration. Scientists, engineers, and workers can exchange ideas freely, accelerate advancement while ensuring it remains rooted in social need. This open environment unleashes human creativity, enabling breakthroughs that would remain impossible under the constraints of private ownership. Technology becomes a living expression of society's collective intelligence rather than a guarded asset controlled by a few. Collective ownership also addresses the ethical and environmental dimensions of technological progress. Under capitalism, technologies that are profitable but socially harmful, such as systems of surveillance, planned obsolescence, fossil fuel extraction, and exploitative data harvesting proliferate because they generate revenue. Meanwhile, essential but unprofitable technologies, such as those aimed at ecological sustainability or public welfare, are neglected. Democratic control allows communities to weigh the long-term consequences of technology, prioritizing ecological balance, social equity, and human health. Progress becomes measured not by market growth but by the enhancement of life itself. True progress requires collective ownership and democratic control of technology, because only when people govern the tools they create can those tools evolve in harmony with human aspiration. Only when workers direct technological development can innovation cease to be a threat and become a promise of freedom. Only when society as a whole determines the purpose of machines can those machines reduce toil, expand leisure, and cultivate human potential. Technology must belong to the many because it is born from the many, and it must serve humanity because humanity is its true creator. Only through collective stewardship can technology achieve its highest mission to elevate life, empower communities, and open the path toward a more just, creative, and liberated world. Workers must unite, organize, and reclaim the future shaped by their labor and intellect, because the world they inhabit is built from their collective effort. Yet the power to shape that world is concentrated in the hands of a minority who neither produce nor sustain it. Every factory, every office, every agricultural field, every technological system, every piece of infrastructure is the result of millions of workers acting together, knowingly or unknowingly, across generations. But under capitalism, this immense creative force remains fragmented, divided, and prevent it from recognizing its own strength. The ruling class maintains its dominance not through superior intelligence or contribution, but through the disorganization of those who produce everything. Therefore, unity is not merely desirable. It is the fundamental condition for workers to reclaim control over their lives and the future that their labor makes possible. Workers must unite because fragmentation is the greatest weapon capital possesses. When workers see one another as competitors rather than comrades, when they are divided by industry, nationality, race, gender, contract type, or skill level, they cannot resist the power of those who own the means of production. Capital feeds on division. It thrives when workers are isolated, insecure, and uncertain of their collective power. Yet the moment workers recognize that their struggles are interconnected, the illusion of capitalist inevitability collapses. Unity transforms scattered grievances into a coherent force capable of reshaping society in accordance with the needs and aspirations of the majority. It is this potential that the ruling class fears most for unified workers. Expose the truth that capital has no authority without labor's consent. Organization is the second pillar of reclaiming the future because spontaneous anger, no matter how justified, cannot dismantle entrenched systems of power. Organization turns raw discontent into strategic action. It allows workers to coordinate their demands, protect one another, and confront employers on equal footing. Through organization, workers build institutions of their own unions, councils, cooperatives, and networks of solidarity that challenge the authority of capital and assert an alternative logic based on mutual support rather than competition. When workers organize, they learn the skills of democratic decision-making, collective planning, and shared accountability. These are not only tools for workplace struggle, but the foundation of a future society in which workers, not capitalists, determine the conditions of economic and social life. Reclaiming the future requires workers to understand that history is not a predetermined sequence, but a terrain shaped by human action. The structures of capitalism appear permanent only because workers have been taught to believe they lack the power to change them. But the future is not owned by capital. It is built daily by those who labor. Every technological advancement, every productive breakthrough, every improvement in human life has its origins in the hands and minds of workers. If technology today threatens jobs, it is only because the ownership of technology lies in the hands of those who value profit over people. When workers realize that their intellect, creativity, and cooperation are the true engine of progress, they also realize that they have the right to decide how progress unfolds. The future must reflect the interests of those who build it, not those who exploit it. Workers must reclaim the future because the alternative is one in which machines, systems, and institutions designed by collective genius are used to undermine collective well-being. Without unity and organization, technological development will continue to serve profit, not people. Work will become more precarious, life more controlled, and society more unequal. But when workers claim their role as authors of the future, technology becomes a tool for liberation, shortening work hours, expanding leisure, improving living standards, and fostering human creativity. A future shaped by workers' intellect is one in which education is accessible, healthcare universal, environmental sustainability prioritized, and human dignity guaranteed. This future is not utopian. It is the logical result of placing human needs above private gain. To reclaim the future, workers must also reclaim their confidence in their own power. Capital depends on the belief that workers are powerless, that the system is unchangeable, that resistance is futile. But history shows that when workers act collectively, they can transform political structures, win rights once considered impossible, and redefine the meaning of freedom. Every gain in labor history's shorter workdays, safer conditions, fairer wages, was won not by benevolence from above, but by unity and struggle from below. The future will be no different. Workers must see themselves not as victims of history, but as its protagonists, capable of directing society toward justice, equality, and shared prosperity. Workers must unite, organize, and reclaim the future shaped by their labor and intellect, because the world already carries their fingerprints, their energy, and their brilliance. What remains is for them to claim openly what they have long created silently. Through unity, they discover their strength, Through organization, they refine it. Through reclamation, they transform the world into one worthy of human potential. In the end, the struggle before us is not simply about machines, technology, or the changing shape of labor. It is about reclaiming humanity itself. Everything that defines modern society, everything that fuels its industries, everything that powers its progress is born from the collective labor, intelligence, and creativity of workers. Yet capitalism twists these achievements into tools of domination, turning machines into instruments of control, innovation into a source of fear, and progress into a privilege reserved for the few. The truth we must confront is that the future already belongs to the workers in substance, but not yet in power. It is the workers who build, maintain, imagine, and propel society forward. Therefore, it must be the workers who decide how that society evolves. By uniting across every boundary, organizing with clarity and purpose, and asserting democratic control over the technologies and systems they create, workers can transform machines from weapons of exploitation into engines of liberation. The liberation of technology is the liberation of humanity, and the liberation of humanity begins with the conscious, collective awakening of the working class. The future is not predetermined. It is waiting to be claimed by those whose hands and minds have shaped it all along.